What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Insurrection Inc. podcast. Thank you for listening, and we hope you enjoy the show.
All right, hello, welcome to Insurrection Inc. This is a very special episode because we are welcoming our brand new co-host, who you may have heard on previous episodes. He is our favorite 12-year-old. We love him to pieces, and his name is Aiden. Say hi, Aiden.
Hello. Thank you, Jay.
You're welcome. And
he's 12 and a half.
At least.
How do you do it when you have to hold it like I'm this many? How do you hold up your hands? Do you flash 10 and then 2.5?
I think so. What you do, you flash 10 and then 2, and you cut one of your index fingers in half and hold up the stub.
What the fuck?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Oh, you know,
just use your toes. What the fuck?
I was just about to say that. Thank you, Tim. Same wavelength.
Yeah, no, of course. I have a story like that. Once I went to North Carolina for vacation when I was like 5, and we went skiing. And if you were under 5, you could ski for free. And I had just turned 5, so my dad told me to lie to the woman and tell her I was 4. So when she asks me, "How old are you?" I hold up my full hand. I'm like this many, and then I see I'm putting up 5. So I don't even put my thumb down. I take my other hand and push my thumb down and go 4. And she still let me ski for free.
That's awesome.
Anyway, that's not our topic.
Jack.
It's not our topic for today. I am not moral. I am very immoral. I believe in illegalism. Anyway, that is related to our topic today. Porter and I have had a lot of conversations lately about left and right and labels and all that sort of bull crap. So, Porter, why don't you tell them about what inspired these sorts of conversations?
I think it started when, let's see, it was definitely a Pete Quinones interview. I don't remember which one came first, but one he was talking to Scott Horton, and then there was another episode where he was talking to Wally Conger. Obviously, Scott Horton is director of the Libertarian Institute, big anti-war guy. Wally Conger is a lesser-known name, but he's the one who wrote Agorist Class Theory, which was kind of drawing on Konkin's work, and it kind of synthesized it and made a class theory out of it. It's like a little 30-40 page pamphlet. And the subtitle, which is controversial, is like a left libertarian approach to class analysis or something like that. It has the phrase left libertarian in there. And in both of those conversations, and class. In both of those conversations, Scott Horton and Wally Conger both brought up Rothbard's essay called Left and Right, The Prospects for Liberty. And so I read it and then sent it to Jay. I was like, wow, this is crazy. I didn't know half the stuff in there. And so kind of a summary of it is Rothbard traces the intellectual origins of libertarianism and kind of compares the left and right, obviously, because that's the title. And he says that the conservatives, the right wing, have always been against liberty, even though this is kind of confusing because in modern times we would consider maybe the Republicans to not be libertarian, certainly, but the American right to be closer to libertarianism than the American left, with the socialists and the communists and whatever, and even the social democrats who aren't quite as far left as the democratic socialists, but still in more bigger opponents to liberty than the right. But Rothbard says historically, in the intellectual traditions that came out of Europe and were transplanted to America, it was always the right that was against liberty, and the left was, the far left was libertarianism, starting with like Lord Acton in England. Adam Smith was a classical liberal. He would have been considered on the left for his time, and there were more radical elements of this as well. Like later, there were Bastiat. He was on the left. He was on the same side of the French Parliament as Pierre Joseph Proudhon, who was also libertarianish. He's also a socialist. He wasn't quite the same as Bastiat economically, but politically they were fairly similar, and they were both considered pretty far to the left for their time. The right was always in support of the monarchy, in support of this rigid hierarchical political structure, what they sometimes called a natural order, although Hoppe would disagree with that, and we'll get to that more later. And then in America, the far left would have been people like first Benjamin Tucker, who was also kind of a leftist even in the modern sense. He was kind of socialist. But then Lysander Spooner, who wasn't really a leftist even in the modern sense, but he would have been considered in the same line. He was both he was an individualist anarchist, just like Benjamin Tucker, and
the
even
only
like
thing about Lysander Spooner
Proudhon
was
to an
that
extent.
the only thing about Spooner that would make him closer to the modern day left was he did not like landlords.
Right. And I think he was also like
Right,
a part of the IWW for a little
Yeah,
bit.
yeah, he was part.
Right.
He joined.
He
the
was.
union.
He called himself a socialist, but it didn't mean the same thing. He wasn't a Marxist. Now most
Right.
socialists today acknowledge Marx's influence. Even, I mean, Proudhon and Marx hated each other. Benjamin Tucker wasn't a huge fan of Marx at all.
Benjamin Tucker actually
Spooner-
hated anarcho. Tucker
Yeah, I
hated
mean,
anarcho-communists. Or was that Thoreau?
probably both of them, but I know Tucker did. He basically said, "You're not anarchists." He said
Yeah, I
communism
think-
and
yeah.
anarchy are completely incompatible. And Tucker defended property explicitly. He wasn't a huge fan of capitalism in the sense of private owners of capital hiring out wage workers, but he also didn't oppose. He didn't oppose it on moral grounds exactly. He didn't think it was ethically permissible to prevent wage labor with violence, like some of the state communists who believe in, killing private business owners and stuff like that. Tucker was always 100% free market. He just thought that in a true free market, there would be no wage labor, which of course the Austrians, especially Rothbard, he corrected Tucker and Spooner on this later. The Austrians would disagree with that view of wage labor, but
Tucker also became a stern right egoist at the end of his life.
I forgot about that. Yeah, that was interesting. That's kind of weird. But my point is, these guys were all considered the far left of the ideological spectrum, and the right was always authoritarian and hierarchical. Not that anarchy is necessarily opposed to hierarchy, but I mean enforced hierarchy, state hierarchy. It was what the right represented. What was that?
Involuntary hierarchy, especially.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so Rothbard kind of contrasts that in left and right, and basically says that real libertarianism is far left.
Yeah. And he, in an earlier episode, I claimed that fascists were just right-wing communists, and then reading Rothbard confirmed that.
Yeah, that's true. Because I should mention this. I completely forgot about that part. He also traces kind of the roots of socialism, where that came out of. He says Marx was actually like sort of right wing, and then there were different branches of socialists that kind of sprung off. There was the Proudhonian branch, who was socialist but not a Marxist, and he was pretty libertarian, although had some wacky economic ideas. But then there were also like the state socialists, and Rothbard calls it basically a confused middle ground. They believed in using the conservative political structures, the state, to enforce liberal goals, which was, freedom for the exploited masses. And of course, their definition of exploitation is different than what the libertarian class theory definition would be. But libertarians do have a class theory. That's part of what Wally Conger discussed on Pete Quinones's show. And so there is this common belief in the existence of exploiters and exploited, and that division in society. Libertarians just believe that the state is the exploiting class, and the everyone who's not a state, the private productive class, is the exploited class, whereas the socialists would divide it on ownership of capital. And Rothbard says that's why it's a confused middle ground. They get the division wrong, and they have liberal goals. They have goals of freeing the masses, but they don't have the right political structure ideas, and they don't have the actual division between exploiter and exploited correct. And so he actually says libertarianism, true liberalism, is farther to the left. He put socialism in the middle, conservatism on the right, and liberalism, what we now call libertarianism, on the left.
I'd say that's a pretty good summary of his piece. And I mean, if you read it, it basically makes the political compass impossible to map. That's one of the first things.
Yeah.
It just makes, because then where would you put somebody like Hoppe on his on his political compass, where it's like,
that's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Because then Hoppe is very, would be politically
Ascended.
left wing. Yeah, exactly. But then he's like so culturally right wing and traditionalist, where his argument is that if we have a state, that it's better to have a monarchy than any form of democracy or republicanism, which is antithetical to what Rothbard talks about in that piece, because in that piece, Rothbard specifically says, like, these revolutions against the old order were necessary for the advent of freedom in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he says that liberalism has its history was a revolution against the monarchy, and that the monarchy was the conservatives. And this is also another interesting divide, is that the classical liberals like Smith, Bastiat, up to Minger, and even Mises, they all were Democrats, not necessarily like full social democrats, obviously, but they believed in a limited representative democracy, delineated by some sort of constitution to limit its powers. Just like the American founders, they were influenced by the same exact ideas. They opposed a monarchy, except for Hamilton. Fuck Hamilton. But Hamilton was a conservative in Rothbard's sense. But the American founders were the quintessential example of this in terms of what liberals believed about the political structure. They were in favor of a strictly limited democracy, but opposed to monarchy. And Hoppe kind of throws a wrench into this whole thing, because he says, actually, democracy is less liberal than monarchy. Neither of them is optimal, but monarchy is actually better for economic liberty and property rights and all the things libertarians and classical liberals believe in. And that complicates Rothbard's analysis, because conservatism was supposed to be authoritarian and monarchical, but it's the monarchy is actually better for liberty than democracy. And I think Hoppe actually proves that pretty well. I'm convinced by his arguments about democracy. I don't know.
What's the thing with Hoppe's argument? It's that I'm sure from him it's entirely cohesive, but the people that follow him tend to sort of forget that whole period between the medieval era and, all the liberal revolutions that happened after the Treaty of Westphalia, where, monarchs were no longer these sort of decentralized powers and became absolute rulers of their lands, and that was not a very liberal period at all.
Right, and that's exactly where the liberal revolutions came from. It was against these centralized monarchies. Liberalism really only rose up in the latter half of the 18th century, from 1750 on, although you could trace its roots to John Locke in the late 17th century.
Regarding
maybe
the liberal revolutions, because you just mentioned it, so we don't have to go off topic later on again.
Mhm.
So in Germany, there was a liberal revolution in 1848. Like, there were also liberal revolutions all over Europe at that time.
Yeah, that year was a big one.
Yeah, and there was basically a parliament. It was called a senate, and like, it was pretty similar to what Rothbard mentioned in his essay. The revolutionaries, the liberals, which probably nowadays would be considered some right-leaning, moderate libertarians, were sitting on the far left, and the socialists were sitting basically in the middle, and the monarchists were sitting on the right. So
Which
just to throw that in.
They stole that from the French Parliament, because that's exactly how we got these terms.
So basically, it went from so what they considered left at the time was basically revolutionary and like a new order, and what they considered far right at the time was maintaining the old order, basically.
That's exactly what it is. And so definitely the arguments of monarchy tend to skip over that whole Treaty of Westphalia part because I can totally understand, you learn your history and you know that medieval Europe was very decentralized. It was all these different power structures competing against each other, which basically stalled each other's power. And yeah, I can totally understand arguments for that when you have guilds
you want to
and
use Germany
monarchies.
as an example.
But you
use
have
Germany as an example. There were like hundreds of princes and principalities inside just that one little land area, and then Germany
they're
took
competing with
longer to
each
do
other.
this. But yeah, exactly.
And they're competing with each other. And then
Germany
you have the
took longer to
church.
centralize.
Yeah. You have the church that's competing with each other. You have churches competing with each other because you have Protestants versus Catholics. You have guilds competing with everybody. So it's this it's a very decentralized system. So yeah, of course, I can totally understand the arguments for that. But then post Treaty of Westphalia, the absolute monarchs were terrible. I mean, that's when you started seeing like, sure, governments making laws didn't really come around until Napoleon when he created the civic code, but you did see like kings making decrees and levying taxes and doing all these things. That's why parliaments started popping up all over the place. That's why we have a Congress, because that starts in England after the Treaty of Westphalia. You have an absolute monarch rising, taking control over all the lords and all the little dominions and all that. And Parliament rises up to make sure that he doesn't have all the tax powers that he wanted. So yeah, it's a little bit of a wonky argument because it skips over that entire like 300-year period.
I would say it is kind of a wonky argument in that sense, and I'm not 100% convinced that the monarchies were better than the democracies that developed out of them, because it is true that the liberalization of economies and the death of mercantilism and stuff was associated with great restrictions on the monarchy and these more democratic reforms coming out, especially in like England and France. Took a while, but France eventually came around. And so that does definitely complicate it. But I think Hoppe's criticism is worthwhile to entertain because
100%.
Because especially when you consider feudalism as a system, Hoppe notes, of course, that it wasn't perfect. The main problem was the existence of serfdom, that these rulers in a lot of places all over Europe had serfs, which were basically, that was the white European version of slavery. And obviously no private property. They didn't have the homestead principle apply to them. That was a problem. But otherwise, and like if you had that, then feudalism was like one step away from anarcho-capitalism. It was I mean, they had the hereditary aristocratic orders and stuff like that, which wasn't libertarian, obviously, because I mean any rulership isn't libertarian. But they did at the same time have, basically, because it was so decentralized and all of these powers were so small, that they basically had competing legal systems. Even in the same area, there was a polycentric legal system.
Yeah, especially in places like Ireland.
Depending on whom you offended and on what exactly the case was, you would go through different legal systems and different sets of laws.
Yeah.
I wasn't there for that episode, but that's what Keith Preston discussed with the rest of you in our interview with him.
Another thing that's sort of... Oh, no, continue.
Go ahead, no.
Another thing that's left out of the argument is that, like I mentioned before, guilds. I mean, even though before the Treaty of Westphalia, these states were a lot more decentralized, it still would not be... If we understand that all freedom comes from economic freedom, then still the liberal revolutions after the medieval era, after the Treaty of Westphalia, were still more libertarian than even, if you take feudalism out of the picture, still the guild system was incredibly economically restrictive. You're looking at something where it's probably the closest thing to communism that you can get, because these were centralized organizations dominating each sector of the economy, deciding who goes in, who produces what, how much of what they can produce, what deals are made. So that was still, economically, it was very centralized in that way.
Yeah, but it's not close to communism just because it's super centralized. I mean, it was still pretty fucked up because you had to pay a lot as a customer, as a consumer. So I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
super,
saying it was
super centralized. But I don't know. Just generally, I think before Marx, we saw a shift towards decentralization, and after Marx, we saw like a shift towards centralization again. Like it's not completely true historically, but just there's a tendency, I would say so.
Oh, 100%. I don't know. Aiden, you got any thoughts?
I did, but I mean, you guys pretty much.
I mean, feel free to reiterate. That's no problem.
Well, I mean, I lost it.
Okay.
I'll
We'll get
jump-
you. We'll
I'll
get
jump-
you.
I'll jump in.
Yeah, we'll get you
I'll
back.
jump
We'll
in when I
reel
get
you
a
back
thought.
in after.
Sure.
But I mean, also one of the things is that this theory that Rothbard had, even if it's historically accurate, it means fuck all today. And I just mean it absolutely means fuck all. Because if you take one look at the libertarian left of today, it is not anybody that what we understand as right libertarian really wants to associate with.
I mean, we try at least, but it's really hard for us to try.
We try, but they don't like us, number one.
Yes. First of all, they don't like us. They hate us. They want us dead.
Yeah.
Somebody bring up the picture of the BLM protest with the commie
the
red
tre-
flag
yeah,
that
the
says
tread on
"We
red.
will tread."
Red,
Oh yeah.
Oh,
we
you know,
will try.
those
As
are-
the BLM is like grabbing the
Yeah,
Gadsden
But
snake.
those are authoritarian leftists. So let's make a distinction. But even when you get down to mutualists, anarcho-syndicalists,
Yeah.
all that shit, I mean, they're the ones that they start playing not a real anarchist. Because of course, you log into Twitter, you log into Instagram, you see right libertarians going back and forth all day. Anarcho-communists aren't real anarchists because they're collectivists. Well, I mean, they were the first anarchists. You might not like their system, but they
Wait.
still technically are anarchists.
Hey, that you just made the perfect transition to our next topic, actually.
Okay.
No, we wanted to talk about the labels of how
yeah.
and ANCAPs go after each other regarding the terms of anarchism and libertarianism.
Yeah. And labels, I mean, labels fucking suck. And this is how this all goes hand in hand, because libertarianism right now has a hard time finding a fucking label. It can't even find a political quadrant to be in. I've even seen Hoppians claim like authoritarian right is still libertarian. So
See, those are the Hoppians that I don't think understand.
no. And it's this really weird dude on Twitter. His profile picture is a Hoppian. Is Hoppa. And he posted a political compass and was like, yeah, authoritarian right is still libertarian because blah, 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 blah. And I saw it and I was like, what the fuck is wrong with this guy? So libertarianism is a very hard place. Yeah.
I recently got an article published on Mises.org. If you follow any of my social media, you saw that. But this comment was it was some crazy dude, and he said, what was it about? I don't know. The article was about kind of collapsing politics in America right now, and like why everyone hates each other so much. And he said his comment was basically like, I don't know why Austrians are so worried about the collapse of the state. And I was like, first of all, it's not what I said. But the rest of his comment was, Hoppe was right. Democracy has failed. Time for Emperor Trump to take over and exterminate the communists. And I was like, now hold on. I don't think that's what Hoppe says.
No, literally, your article would have been peak Hoppian because he's all about radical decentralization, and that's what your article was arguing for.
About, yeah.
Yeah,
Hold
I
on.
think
Also,
what a
To
lot
be
of
fair,
people also
but hold on, his profile picture was
Yeah.
a Trump Groiper. So
Yeah.
And I mean, okay. And the thing is with Hoppe, like, I think I'm pretty sure this is a quote by him, but like I could be completely wrong by this. Hoppe, if you hear this, don't come at me, please.
Hoppe,
If you
avid
somehow-
Insurrection
Not on
Inc. listener.
If Hoppe somehow finds this, don't come at me, please. But like
If Hoppe
his
somehow
thing.
finds this, please come at him. We'd love to talk to you.
But
But go on, Aiden.
I think one of his one thing he said though is like with his radical decentralization, he just wants to like his idea for a perfect Europe would be a million Liechtensteins.
Yeah, I just wanted to say the exact same thing because
it was
I
a
think
million
the,
Liechtensteins.
the thing most leftists get wrong about Hoppe when they say, "Oh, Hoppe wants like some authoritarian, I don't know, dictatorship or monarchy instead of a democracy, a liberal democracy," is that they don't understand that he doesn't want like I don't know the EU as a monarchy just existing basically with a monarch. He wants like a super decentralized system and not like big super states who will go after each other probably after some time.
Yeah. No, and that's definitely because that is his peak argument. But also, our avid listeners include Hans Hermann Hoppe, David Hume posthumously, and Andrew Cuomo.
Oh my god.
They are all very big fans of the show. I constantly get letters from them. It's a little weird with David Hume because I have to pull out like the Ouija board. But besides that,
For everyone who's confused right now, which is everyone except the people talking to each other right now, that's a joke from the group chat yesterday. We were discussing. Was it yesterday? 2 days ago.
yeah, 2 days
Something
ago.
like we were discussing David Hume, which we can bring up now. It's worth it. We're discussing. I was mostly talking because I was reading an essay of his. He's kind of a proto-Hoppian, actually, because David Hume was he was a moderate conservative. He was a Whig, but he wasn't like full-on total monarchist. And also, he was one of the early classical economists. He was good friends with Adam Smith, and he made devastating attacks of mercantilism. His price specie flow mechanism is what it's called now. Is still taught in international monetary economics. It's not always attributed to him now, but he was the first one to kind of outline it. And that's a critique of limitations on trade and the mercantilist policies that were associated with conservatives and monarchs who were trying to give their countries an economic advantage. So he was a huge critic of that. He was very liberal economically, but conservative in terms of political structure. And in that sense, he's very Hoppian, right? Because Hoppe rejects the classical liberal political structure, the democracy, the even representative democracy, in favor of monarchy. Although, of course, Hoppe ultimately prefers extreme decentralization and anarcho-capitalism. But Hume is still kind of in that same vein philosophically. So he's someone else that kind of throws a wrench in Rothbard's theory in left and right, and it just complicates it a little bit.
I just want to take a quick break to announce that we have a Patreon now, where you can support us with money for some reason. That is patreon.com/insurrectioninc. And if you don't want to support us with fiat, you can go to float.app/insurrectioninc. That is FLOTE.app, and give us cryptocurrency. And if you don't want to give us money monthly, because why would you? You can go on down to our merch shop and pick something you like. Links will be in the description, and don't forget to join our Discord. Now back to the show. What did you say that made me say he's an avid listener of the show?
You were having a different conversation with Stratty at the same time I sent the quote from David
Oh
Hume.
yeah, we were talking about that dickhead that was in the Discord. I was like, well, I advertised the Discord on my story because I banned him. He got real pissy and started insulting me in the DMs, and those messages are going at the same time that Porter's talking about David Hume. So Porter
Yeah,
said
and you were like,
something
"Oh
about
yeah, I
David
talked to him."
Yeah,
So
I
you
talked to
were
him. He
talking
sent me
about
insulting
doing the Discord.
messages.
You
Yeah,
were
I was like,
talking
David
about
Hume
doing
sends
the
me.
Discord.
David Hume sends me messages, and I got him mixed up with Michael Humer for a second, so I had to look it up, and I was like, oh yeah, no, David Hume died 300 years ago. So I was like, yeah, he sends it posthumously. I had to do a seance to receive it. That's my favorite thing about group chats, when two conversations are going on at once. But yeah, so what I was saying before is that libertarianism can't fit in the libertarian left quadrant anymore because they don't fucking want us. I mean, you can have somebody like Agorism where you have Konkin, who says that he was to the left of Rothbard, and people who haven't read Rothbard's piece that he was talking about, they just assume, oh, it's because of his wage labor stance, so obviously he must be closer to a mutualist. So obviously he's in the libertarian left, and obviously he's an anti-capitalist. Because you look at his class theory, and obviously, look, he's against capitalism here. He's talking about state capitalists. But then they ignore everything as where he's talking about, oh yeah, no, this is an ideology about entrepreneurship, and we like markets. Oh, I just think wage labor isn't as economically efficient as contracting. So, a free market would have more contractor labor than wage labor. They don't open up a new libertarian manifesto and see that it's dedicated to Ludwig von Mises in it. And So they assume that, oh yeah, mutualism is just mutualism and agorism. That's just, those are just two very similar ideologies, but it's not like anarcho-capitalism at all. So they'll take
Famous
agorists.
anti-capitalist Ludwig von Mises.
And it's not like whatever Konkin is talking about in his pieces, it's really nothing at all too dissimilar to what Mises would talk about, because I have a book from Mises where I'll go grab that real quick.
While he's grabbing that, I'll say that
pamphlet, and it's called A Critique of Interventionism. So what Mises in here is critiquing is the exact same thing that Konkin calls state capitalists, which are people that are detrimental to the market because they're sucking up resources, they're pushing entrepreneurs out, and they're using the state to their advantage. That's what Konkin called a state capitalist. Then he has the regular capitalists, which are just people like making a living, doing work, and they're morally neutral. They're not using the state, but are also not actively going against the state. And then he has the
investor, right? That's the good class, essentially.
Yeah, and then he has like the people that are practicing counter economics, those sorts of entrepreneurs that, oh yeah, these are like he considers the entrepreneur a counter economist. And so that's part of the class theory. That's what Wally Conger put together. Like Wally Conger took all of Konkin's writings and put that together. So you have people that don't take any of this context. Yeah, what's up?
Something else that should be mentioned is Konkin always called himself a Rothbardian. He always considered himself a Rothbardian. He just had some disagreements with Rothbard's application of his theory, his philosophy. But Konkin always, nominally agreed with him on the philosophy, just not always in how it would be applied. And also, if you listen to the episode of Pete Quinones' show where he interviews Wally Conger, listen to them talking about the so-called libertarian socialists and libertarian leftists of today. Wally Conger takes a giant shit on them.
Yeah.
And this is the dude who wrote the left libertarian class analysis, as it's called in the subtitle. Like,
he
it's not the same thing.
He hates them. Konkin hated them. I mean, Konkin was not a libertarian socialist. As much as the libertarian socialists might want to claim Konkin, that was not what Konkin was.
Why is that actually the case? I see so many syndicalists and mutualists who actually like Konkin a lot because he kind of encouraged the labor theory of value. It's so weird.
He didn't. He understood subjective value. He did not like any Marxist view like the LTV. The issue is that because Konkin considered himself a left libertarian, and he was part of the new left in the 60s and the 70s, and because his strategy can be adopted by any form of market anarchist. Like, it's not exclusive to any form. An anarcho-capitalist can use counter-economics, a mutualist can use counter-economics, an anarcho-syndicalist can use counter-economics. So it's a very broad ideology. So I have no problem with a mutualist using agorism. It's just when they try to go and say like, oh no, an ANCAP can't be an agorist and you're a fucking idiot for trying. Well, that's when I have issues with it. And so that's why I think, like, where the fuck can right libertarianism even fit in it? Because number one, they say we're not real libertarians because we're not leftists. They say ANCAPs aren't real anarchists because they believe in capitalism, and we're not capitalists, we're just bootlickers. So we don't have a place on the left.
No.
And I've said this before on another episode, we don't have a place on the right, because you take a look at the authoritarian right and like the populist right that's growing in this country, they're anti-capitalist. They're very much the right-wing socialists that we've seen in the past.
And that Rothbard talked about in Left and Right. Yeah.
America is just in this weird, finicky position where, because it started as the first liberal revolution in the world, the people that were trying to conserve that ended up becoming the conservatives. And that's how you see figures like Barry Goldwater and Calvin Coolidge being conservatives, because they were trying to conserve this new order, but they're not conservatives in the broader sense. So you get this whole mix-up of what conservative means, and then the neoconservatives come along. The paleo-conservatives come along.
Conservatism in America is especially complicated because a lot of people still glorify the founders, which were classical liberals and were left at the time, but right. But they're on the right. The founding fathers would be considered on the right in modern American politics. Obviously, they'd be considered 100%. Right libertarians like us, although not as radical as we are. And Hamilton would be a communist, but
Hamilton the communist. I like that.
But that's what complicates American conservatism as well, is that it has these classical liberal roots that's different from like European conservatism, like the Edmund Burke and the monarchists and stuff.
Yeah, it's so weird here in Europe. Like the liberals always used to be the moderate libertarians, essentially, compared to U.S. standards.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing about the left libertarians, the anarcho-syndicalists, the anarcho-communists, the anarcho, whatever, right? Is they'd sooner ally with their authoritarian counterparts than with, let's say, the individualists, the ANCAPs, right? Because they hate capitalism more than they hate the state.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's just a sad reality. It's
Shout out to Asarchist on Twitter. He was arguing with one of these left libertarian guys.
Oh, he's always doing it. He's always doing
Of course. He always finds these like 15 follower accounts and gets into
It's so unfair. He's like a 3,000 follower account. So he's always getting like 100 likes on his own. And then these other people are like 10 followers, 0 likes. And they're just trying their damnedest to push this boulder up the hill.
He was arguing with some libertarian socialist type about libertarian versus left unity. And the libertarian socialist was arguing for left unity. He's like, I can't ally with people who support capitalism in any form. And he tags some like Marxist-Leninist account. And the Marxist-Leninist comes in there and he's like, dude, after the revolution, I'm putting you in a trench. And the libertarian socialist guy just doesn't know how to react. It's the funniest thread. I don't know where it went. It was like
the
a week
authoritarian
ago,
left
but it was
is constantly
so
saying,
funny.
like, we're going to kill those anarchities after the revolution.
Yeah.
And you still see more left unity bios than lib unity or right unity, because a lot of right libertarians rightfully understand that fascists would also put us in camps after the revolution because we're detrimental to their order. So you see far less right libertarians that will say, oh, right unity.
right.
But then you'll see anarcho-communists that'll be like, oh yeah, no, of course, yeah. So what if the Marxists are gonna put us in camps after, and they're gonna put us up against the wall and force us into labor camps?
At
Still,
least
you know,
we-
at least we're not capitalists.
And Porter, when you said when we were talking about Ace arguing with these 15 follower accounts, and you said that whenever they argue with them, they're pushing the rock up the hill. I'm comparing them to Sisyphus. they become Sisyphus, eternally pushing a boulder up a hill, only
Which
to
is
have it
so-
fall back down on them when they get to the top.
It is so very fitting for Ace. He is very much Camus fanboy. I like that about him.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's like, where the I'm not even concerned about where the fuck libertarianism falls in, because I don't care about compasses. I believe either you like liberty or you don't, and that's where you fall, and then the rest of it is all different flavors of statism.
It's all about principle and being consistent.
Yeah. So it's like, listen, if your preferred economic system is a commune, hey, fuck if I care. I'm just not going to hang out with you. Maybe I'll have a beer with you, but I'm not going to live on your fucking commune. I'll stay out if you don't like me, and you stay out of my place. I don't give a shit. So I'm not going to go and say, like, an ANCOM is not a real anarchist. I'm not going to say an anarcho-syndicalist is not a real anarchist, because they've had this title for longer than us. They've had the theory for longer than us. I'll give them their due credit, but all I care about is, do they care more about freedom, or do they care more about their economic system? Because if they care more about their economic system and they're going to ally with tankies, you're not an anarchist. In the same way that if I see a Hoppian that would prefer to ally with a fascist, I'm sorry, but you are not a real anarchist, because you're betraying your principles of freedom to own the other side.
And at the same time, I do want to make this point clear. I don't want to get too far into strategy. We've got another episode planned about that.
Yeah.
But not all right populism is bad. It's, allying with fascists obviously is not the same thing. But Tom DiLorenzo, I think, made a good point in our interview with him when he says that Rothbard's conception of populism included things like the Mises Institute, which is popular education and trying to spread these ideas to a popular audience, and not trying to get Emperor Trump installed. It's not what he meant.
Populism is such a meaningless term.
Yeah.
And I'm 100% fine with allying with people who oppose those who would violate private property and hurt innocent people and stuff like that, but not when they themselves want to violate private property and hurt innocent people in other ways.
Yeah.
Like, I know a lot of the conservatives who are talking about BLM right now and all the riots going on, oppose burning down small businesses and stuff like that, and I'm 100% okay with them. But I don't think right populism includes allying with these people, because then they turn around and they're like, yeah, the cops should basically enforce a police state for the foreseeable future, and that's completely antithetical to liberty too. I always bring it back to Karl Hess, but he says, it's a great quote in The Death of Politics. He says, I'd rather live with Detroit, Washington, a Watts in flames than an entire nation snug in a garrison. And I think that's how our conception should be.
Like, I've been firmly against all of these riots and the destruction of property. I know and here's the point that's really bothered me, is that how many libertarians and ANCAPs and anarchists have been willing to compromise their principles and just be like, oh, they have insurance, don't worry about these businesses burning down. Yeah, that's bullshit. I've been firmly against these. The solution is not to militarize the cops even more and have APCs rolling down the street. It's roof Koreans. Like, grab a rifle, stand on top of your business, shoot looters, and see how quickly these riots stop in your town.
And also, like, the insurance argument's so bad because someone loses no matter what.
Yeah.
And it's like, wealth is still destroyed through these.
It's the broken
looting.
window fallacy.
It's literally
the broken window fallacy, like with actual broken windows.
Right. It's
Yeah,
just.
I mean, what is insurance? Everybody that has it is paying into it to support other people in the case of an emergency. If an entire town is burning down, well, insurance isn't doing too good. I mean, look at disaster insurance after a disaster. It's not very functional.
Yeah, I mean, also, even if they did have insurance, as Aiden said, that point wouldn't be valid. But as a practical matter, many insurance policies specifically leave out civil unrest because they know that if there's widespread civil unrest, they could get a ton of claims at once, right? And that's not how insurance works. It's supposed to be for extreme circumstances, and there's a pool of money, like you're saying, Jay. And so for that reason, a lot of insurance contracts have a clause that exempts civil unrest for reasons that you can make a claim. So just as a practical matter, a lot of these businesses don't actually have insurance. Even if they did, of course, Aiden would be right, but they just don't. Some of this damage is permanent and will put these people out of business forever. And I mean, there was a study that came out from Yelp the other day using Yelp data. 60% of business closures from the COVID lockdowns are now permanent. And you want to destroy people's lives and businesses on top of this because some idiot cop shot some girl in her apartment. And you're going to take out your anger on the rest of the town instead of the people who deserve it. It's ridiculous.
Which also, have you seen that like bumper sticker slogan that's going around everywhere? It's like, why does property damage necessitate murder, but murder doesn't necessitate property damage? Like, because someone who's violently stripping me of my property is using violence and is posing a threat to my life. You can't shoot someone who is running down the street with your TV, but if they break into your house at 3 a.m, it's perfectly safe to assume that they are willing to do harm to you, so you can use violence. But if somebody is murdered, you can't just go and start burning down innocent people's businesses because you're upset.
It's collectivist thinking. It's considering private property as an abstract class and human life as an abstract class, and not thinking about individuals. It's an individual was killed by police, and it's not. In the example of private property, an individual who was attacking somebody and attacking their property is killed by the owner. That is not the same thing as people attacking private property just because someone was killed. You see what I'm saying? They're mixing up. I hate cops so much, dude.
All right.
I hate that we have to have this conversation. Like it's
Yeah.
come to this. People are burning down their own cities or other people's cities, for that matter.
Yeah, no, you
I
can
think
bust.
a lot of these protesters are coming from other places.
You can bust in rioters to destroy a city, but you can't have somebody drive 30 minutes to another town to defend it.
Exactly. Yeah.
Unfortunately, I gotta go and fulfill the needs and wants of people. So I unfortunately gotta head off.
Aiden's
Okay,
culvert
wage
has
slave
not been up.
Lord.
His culvert has not been burned down in the riots, so Aiden still has to show up for
I-
work.
Unfortunately, I mean, all right, later.
Later.
Maybe burning some businesses is okay if I don't have to work.
Only if it helps this podcast more. But
It's the
I
egoist
mean-
perspective on it, I guess.
moving slightly off that onto a similarly related topic. So since we understand that like libertarianism and anarcho-capitalism as we understand it today, I would even argue agorism doesn't have that much of a place on the libertarian left because of how much they fucking hate us. So even though Rothbard's article is very informative on the history, it has no bearing on reality because we will never be accepted in the libertarian left. We have to homestead our own quadrant. So I will take the libertarian
We're
right
going to
for
make
now.
our own quadrant our property because we're homesteading it.
Lib right wins again. But
We're
with that
selling
in
off
mind-
the current live right quadrant and homesteading our own.
We're going
And
off the compass. We're going to another.
anarcho-frontierism wins
We're
again.
going to another continent. But with that in mind, I mean, Porter and I, we've obviously, shifted ideological titles. Porter has done it twice now, but about a year ago,
Twice. I've gone back and forth on the label agorism so many times.
yeah.
It's been more than twice. I just like periodically take it in and out of my
Yeah.
bio and all my social media. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't
same
know.
here for me. This is like maybe my third time using agorism as a title, but I would say like a year ago, all of us would have been calling ourselves ANCAPs, right?
Probably,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Tim, do you still call yourself an ANCAP?
Yeah, like I have regarding these labels, I've watched a streamer called Wash. I think you might also know him.
Oh,
He's
fuck
a
Vosh.
libertarian
Oh my God.
socialist. And I rewatched his debate with wait, who was it again? Oh my God, I forgot. The presidential candidate who was in Iraq
Adam
for the
Kokesh?
Libertarian Party. Yeah, Kokesh, right. And they were essentially also just having this weird terminology debate, which is kind of unnecessary and
Yeah, that's all it
doesn't
turns
bring
into.
anyone
That is all it ever
forward.
turns into.
Yeah, and Kokesh didn't just use the label ANCAP, he also used the label voluntarist. And for some time, I referred to myself not as an ANCAP, but voluntarist, because essentially then leftists can't
It's-
bash at you for calling yourself an anarchist.
I
but
just don't like the
it's-
term voluntarist.
yeah,
I
it's
just don't
so
like it.
weird. So I've
I don't like it either.
basically
It doesn't hold the
identified
same
as
weight as
ANCAP.
anarchist does.
Yeah, I've identified as an anarchist for basically a year now, and while I had my issues with the label, I never really let it down or just put it away.
For me, it's just like I have remained economically and philosophically an anarcho-capitalist for this entire time. That'll still be my preferred system. It's just in light of the last few months, I've decided that the strategy of agorism is more worth it, and it's easier just to call yourself an agorist than to explain, yeah, no, I'm an anarcho-capitalist that really likes the practice of agorism, so I like to use counter economics, but I'm still very much close to Rothbardian. No, it's easier to say agorist.
Yeah.
But then the more time you spend with agorists, and you hate agorists, the more time you spend with
That is true.
anarcho-capitalists,
I can remember some agorist who on Instagram who was just his main task was basically to distance himself from capitalism. He wrote an essay which was called "Ditch Capitalism" or something like that, and was just blatantly retarded.
the more time you spend with him, the more time you hate him, and the more time you want to go back to the term anarcho-capitalism. Especially when you see so many people that used to be anarcho-capitalists and they go down. Because here's the thing, Porter and I have noticed. Libertarians on Instagram go down to author-right pipeline. But libertarians on Twitter go to the lib-left pipeline. So you see on Twitter a lot of former anarcho-capitalists or ANCAP-adjacent anarchists, libertarian anarchists, that they go and they start bashing capitalism. And they start going down the lib-left pipeline. And they start sounding it's still not like mutualist territory, but they start sounding more like Tuckerite anarcho-individualists, and they're making all these weird arguments against capitalism. And all that really makes me want to do, besides wring their necks, is double down on the term anarcho. But then I also hate having all the terminology debates associated with anarcho-capitalism. I think the term libertarian anarchist is really a mouthful and leads you to the same route as the debates with anarcho-capitalism. So I'm not a fan of any of those. But you still need a title, and then you can't go anarchist because then they're like, oh, what are you, a communist? No, I believe in Austrian economics. You're down the same route again. So it's like, what the fuck are we doing?
Yeah, it's really hard.
I've gone back and forth. Like I said, I had Rothbardian in my Twitter bio for a little while, for like a month now, and then I recently changed it to anarcho Babylon Beist because that's pretty much where I am. Like the Babylon Bees view, like the cynicism about politics, the anti-war views, the Christian theology, but full anarchist. It's like a combination of Michael Malice and the Babylon Bee writers. That's kind of where I am right now. But the label's just a joke. I've kind of given up on the usefulness of labels. Like people I know already know where I stand, and I'm okay with that. I've learned more about strategy. I've developed different ideas about the proper strategy. I'm also very sympathetic to counter economics. I think you need a broader strategy, but that can be the core. I haven't rejected that part of agorism. It's more like the label, not the actual ideology of agorism that I've kind of moved away from. And I've learned more about economics, of course, but like my principles are the same as they've always been. It's just about figuring out how to communicate that, and more, I think just labels aren't really helpful at all. So I'm just going to joke around. Anarcho Babylon Beist, we'll see how long that lasts. I think on Instagram I still have Backyard Separatist, which I like. It was from a meme about like awakened ideologies, and it was just one of the ones near the lip right area of the compass. I thought it was funny because it sounds like Hoppian agorism, basically. It's like separate. It's like separatism, but it's backyard. It's like a garden or something. That's kind of the vibe I got from it. I'm pretty sure it was entirely meant to be a joke, but I like it.
That was my idea.
Yeah, I do have to give you credit for that. That was a pretty good one. I came very close to putting that in my Twitter bio instead of anarcho Babylon Beism.
I had so many people
on that one.
When I was in my Instagram bio, I had so many people trying to fight with me over it, and it was just a troll.
I remember you got so many DMs as soon as you changed it.
It is the perfect title, I'm telling you.
I mean, so what do y'all think? Do you like communicate using labels now, or are you kind of in the same boat I am, where it's mostly just a joke to you, and you just like talking with people about your actual beliefs and not worrying about what you call it?
I've done a lot of joke ones, like I had anarcho synthwaveism in my bio for a couple of weeks. But, I just do that regularly just to fuck around. I always have, like, my real identifier and then my joke identifier. And, I mean...
Anarcho-Vice-Cityism.
That was...
Yeah, oh my god, that was my idea, actually. Yeah, I can remember writing
but
that.
It's like, I like having the label as an identifier, so people know what they're getting into, at least. But then at the same time, I hate having to debate with people over it.
Yeah.
I've gone through I've done like Rothbardian market anarchist, regular market anarchist, Rothbardian agorist, and regular ANCAP.
I think that's a good one. Rothbardian market anarchist or something like that. I think
it's just too mouthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's mouthy, but it's pretty accurate, and
it's very accurate.
Just Rothbardian period.
Yeah, regular Rothbardian was another one. I like the term market anarchist because I've got no problem with mutualists existing. I've got no problem with the rest of those people existing. Obviously my preferred system is a private property oriented market system like capitalism. But I'm just sick of the debates.
There's so much baggage that comes with that term. We didn't even get into the history of that term in this episode. I don't think we should. We discussed it before. We talked about it with Per Byland a little bit. There's just so much baggage that comes with that term. It's not entirely helpful.
Yeah, like if I had to pick one, it would either be Rothbardian market anarchist or just market anarchist. And I mean, politically also, I am hating everybody lately. I go on Instagram, I hate everybody. I'm going on Twitter, I hate everybody. I only like you people. So I'm feeling very much H.L. Mencken. Because if you read Mencken, he never had anything nice to say about anybody.
Yeah, he was like cynic #1 his whole life. He was
Wait,
the leader of the cynic.
anarcho-mankianism? That would be
Yeah, it's just
Oh,
being
that's
a
a good
crotchety old
one.
bastard
That's
your
a good
entire life.
That's basically just Rothbardianism. I mean,
Yeah.
Mencken had a huge influence on Rothbard.
Yeah.
But I
So
found
it's like, if I
I
had
found
to
a
say-
great quote from him earlier today. I'd heard it before, but I finally wrote it down. Is under democracy, one party always devotes its chief energies to trying to prove that the other party is unfit to rule, and both commonly succeed and are right.
His democracy quotes are so fucking killer. I love it.
They're so good.
But so it's like politically,
I'm gonna post
I
that
would
one
call
on
myself like
election
a
night.
Menckenite. Economically a
Yeah.
Rothbardian, and strategically like a Conkanite.
That's a good one. Yeah, I did have that in my bio for a very short time on Twitter. It was politically Rothbardian, strategically Konkin, or what was it? Philosophy of Rothbard, strategy of Konkin, something like that. I don't know.
To basically
You get
sum
the
this
point.
episode up, the strategy for ANCAPs, libertarian anarchists, whatever you want to call yourself, is just to ascend politics and don't refer to labels or make up your own labels.
Yeah, pretty much. But I think like for ANCAPs, I think market anarchists would be the best way to go down because we have the best
Yeah.
argument for economics.
Yeah,
And when
probably.
you're
It's the most
debating the market-
consistent one.
When you're debating the market, if you know Austrian economics, it is very easy to even own a mutualist.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's also possible to make, like, especially when arguing with leftists and left-wing market anarchists, you can still make some utilitarian takes, especially because of Mises. But I think that's another
Yeah.
topic, and we already
Oh,
spoke
when-
about that.
When you're
I've
debating
become more
economics
sympathetic
with a-
to
Hmm?
Mises's utilitarianism recently.
Pretty
Actually,
good. Like
he had like a rural utilitarianism is what he called it. It was what Henry Hazlitt, however you pronounce his last name.
Hazlitt.
It's what he was too. Yeah, Hazlitt.
When
They-
you're debating economics with other libertarians and anarchists that do not share the same private property views, you have to go utilitarian because
Yeah.
when they're debating like voluntary, well, you can't say, well, no, your system isn't actually voluntary because that's a shit argument and we know why they use it on us all the time. So that's a shit argument. You got to argue utility, basically. You got to argue like, okay, we all agree the state shouldn't exist. So what is the economic system that's going to drive the most wealth and prosperity for everybody? We have the answer. We have the proof. Even restricted markets bring more wealth than any other system in the world. So, and they're based on private property. So we know we can win the economic arguments. So market anarchist is probably the best way to go.
There's also that's a weakness of the term voluntarist as well. Is that
Yeah,
people make up
Yeah,
like you can pretty much cram anything into that term that you don't like and call it involuntary, which
Yeah,
doesn't make you
it's
correct, but it just makes it harder
complicated,
to use the term.
this is what I also really
Yeah.
hated about the debate between Walsh and Kokesh was that the debate they both agreed that they don't like involuntary hierarchy and that they want to abolish it, but the way they essentially see what is voluntary and what is not is for everyone. I think it's different, so it's really hard to have a debate regarding that.
Yeah, of course, the libertarian socialist like Vosh says that capitalist ownership patterns in the means of production are involuntary, which we would disagree with, and so it's not a useful term, not entirely useful at least.
Yeah, so it's really hard. That's why I also, even though like at the beginning of my journey to anarcho-capitalism, essentially, when I read Mises, I never really abolished the utilitarian takes Mises essentially wrote down because they're still important. And I think, I don't know, libertarianism wouldn't be the same without it. Like, you can't argue with a libertarian socialist about property rights because they don't want to listen to you and they don't accept it. So it doesn't bring anyone forward in the debate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I just
mean,
came up with the perfect descriptor. Austrian market anarchist.
Yeah, that would be pretty accurate.
There we go. AMA.
Mhm.
I'm an AMA.
Put it in your bio, and when people ask you questions, be like, "Why are you asking me a question?" It doesn't stand for
Really
ask me anything. It's Austrian market anarchist.
There we go. I'm gonna change that real quick. You're gonna say something, Porter, before I interrupted you?
I think I was, but I forgot it. It wasn't that important. Yeah, I think
There we go.
we pretty much covered everything. I'm still.
Yeah.
You can go with Austrian market anarchist. I'm gonna keep Babylon Beist for now, but yeah, I feel like that's a pretty good one. We'll have to change it eventually as soon as it gets associated with anarcho-capitalism, but it's okay.
Oh god, I hate that. It all just boils down to terminology debates. I fucking hate terminology.
Yeah,
debates.
it's retarded. It's these debates are just unnecessary, but unfortunately, they are still important for politics for some reason.
Yeah. Or just go anarchist.
to a
Flat out
certain-
anarchist.
Yeah, that's what when people ask me, I just tell them I'm an anarchist. Like people who don't know anything about politics, and they're like, "Who are you voting for this election?" They're like, "Have you decided if you're going to vote for Biden or Trump?" I'm like, "I'm an anarchist." They're like, "You're a what?" So I do it for the reaction most of the time, but I do just like plain anarchist. That's a fun term.
Yeah,
If somebody's seriously asking, I go market anarchist. If there's like, in that case, like, who are you voting for? I'm an anarchist. I don't give a shit. Yeah. But anyway, this is better. This is better than the last time we did it. I like this episode.
Yeah,
Pretty good
this
one.
was a good discussion.
Anything else, guys?
Don't think so.
check out the
Pretty
new
much.
designs. Oh my god!
Oh,
forgot about
thank
that.
you,
Check out the
Tim.
new
Yes.
Yeah.
We talked about Rothbard a lot this episode. I made a new design that you can get on a bunch of different items in the Teespring store that's inspired by a Rothbard quote from, I believe, the Ethics of Liberty. Maybe, I don't know, correct me. Is it the Ethics of Liberty or what's the other big one? I'm blanking on the name. Jay, help me out.
Man, economy of the state.
No, the
Anatomy
other
of the
libertarian. What?
Anatomy of the state.
No, the other libertarian book, the Libertarian Manifesto. But that's the
So
subtitle.
there's Ethics of Liberty, and there is For a New Liberty.
For a
I think
New
it
Liberty.
wasn't
I think this is.
Ethics of Liberty. Yeah, I think it was an Ethics
Yeah.
of Liberty. I'm not sure.
Well, either way, the quote is: "War is mass murder, conscription is slavery, taxation is robbery." And there's a really cool design.
Yeah, it's really good.
I think it's really cool. I'm proud of it. I'm pretty proud of it.
It's
So
the most
check out the
successful post on the
Teespring store.
Instagram
We're
page.
always adding designs.
Yeah.
It's also on the Instagram page. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I put the plug for the merch store in the middle. For some reason, Craig decides to crap out in the last minute.
Goodbye, bot Craig.
Yeah. So we still have GR who's recording. So at least we have the ending. But yeah, check out
Thank
the
you,
merch
Craig's
store.
tag along friend.
If you're on YouTube, like the show, comment, subscribe to the channel. If you're on iTunes, leave a rating. Please leave reviews. I keep checking it to see if there's anything funny. None of you people are doing it. I really want to read something funny. We can't leave reviews for ourselves constantly.
Or from our parents.
Besides that, share the show, and I guess we'll catch you guys next time.